Morgan woke up suddenly because of the noise coming from outside her bedroom. "They're too busy with my sister's wedding. I'm still sleepy," she muttered to herself. She was about to close her eyes again when her bedroom door flew open. There she saw her mum, whose face looked panicked. "Where's your sister?" Melissa asked her youngest daughter Morgan with confusion. "I don't know, Mom," Morgan replied. Melissa held her head in stress. Morgan immediately got up to approach her mother. "Why, what's going on?" Morgan glanced at the piece of paper her mum was holding. Her eyes widened upon reading that her sister had run away with her boyfriend. "How about the wedding?" Melissa exclaimed, obviously distressed. To strengthen the bond between two business families, there had been an arranged marriage set for both families' oldest children. But now Annie was missing because she went off with her longtime boyfriend. "Everything's prepared," Melissa said with frustration. Morgan had no words. She couldn't really blame her sister Annie. She knew how much Annie loved her boyfriend. "How will we tell the Delator family?" Morgan could only hug her mother, as she had no idea how to fix this. "Mama!" Morgan's dad Carl shouted from downstairs. The two women panicked and ran down quickly because they knew that shout was more than just calling. Morgan stopped abruptly upon seeing her grandmother, who had raised her and Annie, struggling to breathe. Everyone was in a frenzy, and they rushed Grandma Benny to the hospital. Her grandmother's heart was weak, so any family trouble was kept away from her. But upon learning what Annie had done, she couldn't handle it. Thankfully, her grandma was stabilized. Yet the doctors warned them that if it happened again, she might not recover. "Grandma!" Morgan called out tearfully at her grandmother's bedside. She was terrified to see her in that condition. "Don't let that happen again, okay?" Morgan sobbed. "I was just so shocked at what happened. This is such a huge embarrassment for us, and your sister's action will have a big impact on our business," said Bella, worried. "Mama, come on. Don't think about the wedding for now. We've already started searching for Annie," Melissa interjected. Carl agreed. "Yes, Mom, but if we don't fix this, it could drag us down. We really need the Delatores to stay on top. It's impossible to find them if they're hiding, and the wedding is tomorrow," Benny lamented. Morgan clutched her grandma's hand, but remained silent. Benny stared at her granddaughter. Morgan. Morgan should be the one to get married." Morgan's brows shot up. "Me?" she asked in shock. "You don't have a boyfriend, so you won't have any problems," Benny told her granddaughter. "But I don't even know the guy," Morgan protested. "Annie didn't know who Rick was either," Melissa pointed out. Benny took Morgan's hand. "Dear, please save our business." "But Grandma," Morgan started, but stopped when she saw her grandmother clutch her chest. "Mama, call a doctor," Morgan yelled in panic. "Please, Morgan," Bella pleaded, gasping for air. "You're our only hope." "All right, Grandma, I'll marry him. Just please get better," Morgan said in frightened desperation. Morgan froze when her grandmother's breathing suddenly eased. "Carl, Melissa, arrange everything for Morgan," Benny ordered. She looked at Morgan, who still had tears in her eyes. "The Delatores are good people," Melissa assured her daughter. Morgan wiped her tears. A few hours before the wedding, Morgan was alone in a room, feeling nervous. In the blink of an eye, she was about to take her sister's place, the sister who chose the man she really loved. "But as for me, I don't even have a boyfriend," she whispered to herself. Morgan looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes went wide when she saw Annie behind her in the reflection. Annie took the flowers Morgan was holding. "Come with me. Don't let them take your freedom," Annie urged. Morgan pulled the flowers back, smiling at her sister. "I don't have a boyfriend, nor do I have admirers, unlike you. Maybe this is the only way for me to get a husband." Morgan even joked. "It's okay, Annie. Besides, there's always annulment. The important thing is that you get to be with your boyfriend. Our business stays safe, and Grandma can relax, Morgan explained, smiling. Because Morgan was such a positive person, Annie felt more guilt. If I weren't pregnant, I'd have chosen to marry Rick, but I don't want my child to grow up with a different father, and I really love my boyfriend, Annie said tearfully. Oh my God, I'm gonna be an aunt, Morgan exclaimed happily. That's right, 2 months already, but it seems shy to show itself, Annie replied with a grin. I'm happy for you, Morgan said. Suddenly, Annie hugged her sister. I'm so sorry, Morgan, Annie cried. It's okay, sis. This wedding is just a formality anyway. We'll just share a house, like roommates, Morgan joked. Their moment was cut short by noises outside. See you round, Annie said her farewell before leaving. Morgan was ready. The staff entered and instructed her on what to do. Now she stood in front of the large church door, waiting for it to open. She felt nervous because she hadn't even seen the man she'd be standing with at the altar. When the door opened, many eyes fell on her. It was obvious this was a business-centered wedding, as most guests were from the corporate world. When she reached the middle aisle, Morgan stopped momentarily upon seeing the man waiting for her at the far end. She had thought he'd be an older man, but she was wrong. He was extremely handsome, with a gentle face. Morgan continued walking until she reached him. She didn't hear him say a single word, not even through the ceremony. Even when it ended, no greeting from the man beside her. Are you an only child? Morgan asked Rick. Yes, he answered curtly. Morgan just nodded, then watched as Rick left her side to chat with someone she guessed was his friend. The event carried on until it was time for her to go home. Where's Annie? Rick asked seriously, while driving them to their house. Morgan debated whether to tell him the truth. You already know my sister, she deflected. I know Annie Consep, the oldest child of President Carl. I don't know at all, he replied. Morgan stared out the window, guessing Rick would have preferred her sister, and she couldn't blame him because Annie was more attractive. She went off with her boyfriend, Morgan answered bluntly. So she destroyed the deal, Rick said, making Morgan's nerves spike in fear that he might expose them and ruin everything. She's pregnant. Would you want to marry her knowing she has a child by a man she truly loves? Morgan explained. Rick glanced at her briefly, then looked back at the road. How is that any different from marrying someone you don't know? Annie seems smarter and more sensible than you. Morgan raised an eyebrow, feeling a tinge of insult. I do have sense, actually 5. Touch, sight, hearing, taste, smell, and a sense of humor too. Besides, if you're so smart, why marry someone you've never met? Morgan snapped. Because my dad wants it. Everything goes to me as soon as I bring home a wife. I don't want my uncle taking what my dad worked for, Rick answered. So it's still all about business. What, did you think my sister would marry you for love? Morgan huffed. Wait, what's your job anyway? Rick asked in confusion. Morgan smiled. It seemed Rick had finally taken a little interest in her. She took a deep breath, ready to reveal her career. I'm a civil engineer, Morgan said with a grin. Rick slammed the brakes, almost causing Morgan's head to hit the windshield. Had she not been wearing her seatbelt? You're an engineer? Rick asked, startled. Yes, Morgan replied, equally surprised by his reaction. Why didn't they tell me? That would have spoiled the surprise, Morgan joked, thinking Rick was starting to warm up to her. So that means you can't really help me with my company. Rick's tone was suddenly serious. Morgan's smile faded. I should have found someone else, Rick muttered. Hey, are you underestimating me? I'm an engineer who's also from a business family. You think because I'm an engineer I can't do business? Morgan protested. Business is everything. Make sure you're good at it. I hate stupidity, Rick growled. Morgan suddenly got out of the car. What are you doing? Rick shouted, stepping out of the vehicle to check on his sulking wife. It was dark out, the evening deepening, so there were fewer cars on the road, but Morgan kept walking off, and Rick followed. If you don't get back in the car, I'll leave you here, Rick warned. Drive home alone then, Morgan fired back. Rick jogged to catch up and grabbed her hand. Are you a child? I thought you hated stupidity. Now I guess engineers are idiots? Morgan scoffed. You think we can't handle business? For your information, you need me to get your inheritance, so don't act like you're some hero, Morgan added. And for your information, your family needs me too, so you won't go bankrupt. Now get back in the car before I leave you here. Leave me. I have money for a ride. Hey, let me go, Morgan yelped as Rick hoisted her over his shoulder like a sack, forcing her back into the car. She tried to get out again. Enough, I'm tired. I just want to rest, Rick barked authoritatively. Morgan froze at his commanding tone. He buckled her in, then got into the driver's seat. I hate childishness, Rick sighed. Well, I hate you, Morgan muttered. They continued on until they arrived at Rick's house. Morgan's home was large, but Rick's was like half a shopping mall turned into a home. Morgan took a deep breath as the man she wanted to talk to got out first and walked inside. Lord, if this wasn't for Grandma and our company, I'd have gone back home hours ago, she murmured to herself. Morgan exited the car, clearly annoyed. Super rich, but no honeymoon for me, just bringing me home, she grumbled, heading inside. One of the house staff greeted her. Hi, Morgan said. She looked around, trying to spot Rick, who was nowhere in sight. Where's Rick? She asked. He's in his bedroom, answered another staffer, who led Morgan to Rick's door and knocked. The door opened, revealing Rick, freshly showered and about to lie down. You could have at least shown me my room. Your house is huge. I don't know where to go, Morgan complained. You have 5 senses, plus your sense of humor. Maybe you should use common sense. We got married earlier, so obviously you stay in my room. Do husband and wife need 3 separate rooms? Rick asked sarcastically. Oh, no way am I sharing a room with you. I might go crazy, Morgan grumbled. Fine, find yourself a room, Rick responded, shutting the door. Ugh! Morgan marched off, trying door after door, all locked until one finally opened, only to reveal Rick's mom, Joy. Sorry, ma'am, Morgan blurted, quickly starting to close the door. Wait, dear, what are you doing? Why aren't you resting yet? Where's Rick? Joy asked, puzzled. I was looking for him, Morgan fibbed. Joy walked over. He's at the end of the hall. That's your room with Rick. Joy accompanied Morgan to her son's room, knocked, and he opened at once. Rick, why'd you leave your wife wandering around? Joy teased. That's not... Rick started to say. It's okay, Ma. Mom, Morgan cut in, smiling. I told him I wanted to look around the house, but then forgot to ask him exactly where he was. You're married now. Call me Mom, and tomorrow you can explore all you want. Tonight, get some rest, or give me a grandchild, Joy joked. I don't have that much energy for that, Mom, Morgan laughed. All right, I'll leave you two alone, Joy said, nudging Morgan inside and closing the door. Morgan glanced at Rick, who merely turned away and flopped onto the bed. She headed to the bathroom to shower. After we save my family's business, I'm definitely filing for an annulment, she mumbled while washing up. When she finished, she saw the blankets and pillow on the couch. Where do I sleep? Morgan asked. Rick pointed to the couch, making Morgan's eyebrow twitch. If we're not sharing the bed, why are we even in the same room? She grumbled. Think my mom would let us have separate rooms? Rick retorted. Morgan stomped over to the couch, feeling sorry for herself. How chivalrous. Making a woman sleep on the couch, she muttered, throwing a pillow at Rick. Ugh, fine, sleep there then, Rick snapped. He took his own pillow, stretched out on the couch, but he was too tall, so it didn't fit him. Morgan sat on the bed, watching him, feeling a bit sorry. What if I just sleep there instead? Morgan offered. Rick shot her a withering look. He stood up and switched off the lights. Okay, I'll sleep here, Morgan sighed. She grabbed the pillow and blanket to move Rick onto the bed, but Rick didn't open his eyes, so she tapped him. Hey, move back to the bed. You don't fit on the couch. Morgan screamed when Rick suddenly pulled her down, putting both of them on the bed. They now lay side by side. I'll just sleep on the couch, Morgan protested, trying to get up. Rick tugged her back. Just stay here so I can get some real rest, he said. Morgan couldn't move, as they were inches apart. She turned away just to breathe. Don't expect anything. I don't want kids with you, Rick muttered. Ha! Don't think I'd ever let you take my virginity, Morgan replied. Huh, well I'm not planning to either, Rick said. Morgan rolled over to face him, but he'd already turned his back on her. Whatever, she snapped, turning away too. In the morning, Morgan woke to the sound of movement. Rick was up, getting dressed, looking in the mirror. You sleep like a tornado, he complained. I'm never messy, Morgan refuted. If you say so, Rick replied flatly. Do you have work already? Morgan asked. Yeah, I'm a professional, and right now I'm doubting if you're really an engineer. I expected breakfast and coffee on the table by the time I woke up, Rick muttered. Morgan got up. If you want that, why not marry a maid? She quipped, walking into the bathroom. During the first month, they acted like cats and dogs, never agreeing on anything. But Morgan was getting used to living in Rick's house. One time, Rick had an event to attend, and needed Morgan there, even though she knew no one at that party. People were enjoying themselves, and Morgan sipped a little alcohol. So, how did you and Rick meet? Someone asked Morgan. They sat at the same table, with Rick by Morgan's side. She had drunk too much. In church, Morgan answered. He was praying for me. Rick cut in. I never prayed for you, Morgan retorted, making Rick cover her mouth. She's had too much. We need to leave, Rick said, helping Morgan to his car. They drove back, and upon reaching their room, Morgan, slightly drunk, grumbled, Never tell anyone we just got married like this. And you lied, saying you prayed for me. I never popped up in your prayers. I only said that to dodge more questions, Rick replied. Whatever, Morgan yelled. She collapsed onto the bed, dizzy and sleepy. Rick didn't sleep right away. He went downstairs to drink until he, too, was inebriated. When he finally returned, he found Morgan asleep. He lay down, not to sleep, but to stare at her. He was surprised when Morgan's eyes fluttered open. He didn't move from his position, looking straight into her eyes. She said nothing as she touched his face. Neither realized how their lips ended up meeting. Morgan's mind told her to push him away, but her body wouldn't obey. Their kiss deepened until both were overtaken by the moment. The next day, both woke up with no clothes on. Morgan shot up in shock. I thought that was a dream, she gasped. So you've been fantasizing about me in your dreams? Rick teased with a grin, eyes still closed. As if. You probably got me drunk for this to happen, she accused. Who was it that kept drinking like she was best pals with the celebrant? Rick countered. He picked up his scattered clothes. What do we do now? Morgan asked worriedly. It's normal for a married couple to do that. Relax, it's not illegal, Rick said. But we're only married on paper, Morgan replied. So, in both our families, love doesn't exist. Only what's good for business, Rick explained, heading into the bathroom. Morgan felt a wave of sadness. This wasn't how she'd pictured her life. Months passed, and nothing really changed. It was obvious business was the only reason they were together. Rick was about to be proclaimed president of his father's company, which thrilled his mum, Joy. "Are you excited? You're finally following in your father's footsteps," Joy said, happily over breakfast. Morgan arrived in her PPE gear since she had an emergency project at a site. "Where are you going, Morgan?" Joy asked in confusion. "To the site. They had an urgent matter," Morgan answered. "You won't come to the building proclamation for your husband?" Joy asked. Morgan glanced at Rick. "I will, Mum. I just need to check the site. Then I'll go straight to his office," Morgan assured her. After breakfast, they left in separate cars for work. Morgan finished up at the site quickly so she could attend Rick's event. But on her way, her car suddenly died. "Oh, perfect timing," Morgan fumed, trying in vain to restart it. She called Rick, but he didn't answer. "Morgan?" She looked over her shoulder and spotted a familiar face, though the name eluded her. "Marco," the man introduced himself as he got out of his car. "We met at that birthday party, Rick's friend." "Oh, right, Marco, what are you doing here?" Morgan asked, baffled. "I should be asking you. It's scorching out. Are you okay? Is your car okay?" Morgan shook her head. "It just stopped. I have no clue why." "All right, I'll call someone to tow your car. You can ride with me. Rick needs you there and it's important to him," Marco said. Morgan agreed to hitch a ride since she didn't want to be late for Rick's big event. "So, how are things with you and Rick?" Marco asked as they drove. "We're fine. We're both busy," Morgan replied. They chatted until arriving at the building. Marco was playful and made Morgan laugh. The moment they stepped inside, Rick spotted them from afar. "There's your husband," Marco pointed behind Morgan. She turned and saw Rick wearing his usual serious look. Morgan sighed. "He's always so serious, like he can't take a joke." "Were you two talking about me?" came Rick's voice at her side. He'd closed the distance between them quickly. "Congratulations, Rick. Finally, you've achieved what you've always wanted," Marco said warmly. "Thanks," Rick answered curtly. "Congrats." Morgan beamed at him, but he showed no reaction. The celebration began for the company's newly appointed president. Morgan wasn't bored, as it ended promptly, and she managed to greet some guests. Night fell, and it was time to go home. She and Rick walked to the parking lot. Just then, Marco reappeared. "Morgan, you forgot your jacket in my car," he said, handing it over. Morgan reached for it, but Rick grabbed it first. "Thanks," Rick said, taking Morgan's hand and guiding her into their own car. "How long have you known Mark?" Rick asked while they were traveling. "No, he just saw me earlier. My car broke down, so he gave me a ride here," Morgan explained. "Next time, call me," Rick said. Morgan took her phone and showed him the missed calls he hadn't answered. "I already know you never have time for me," Morgan replied. "Why should I give you any time?" he asked. Morgan sighed. "You're right, so don't expect me to call you either," she told him. They arrived at the house. Rick got out first and went right in without waiting for Morgan. For days, Rick didn't speak to his wife. He always came home late from work. Morgan woke up early, with no job that day. She saw Joy cooking breakfast with a maid. "Mom, let me help," Morgan offered. "Perfect. Cook your husband's pancakes and bacon," Joy said. Morgan started making bacon and pancakes, but after just a few minutes, something smelled burnt. "What is that?" Morgan turned and saw Rick, freshly awake. He hurried over to check the scorched pancake. "What are you doing?" Rick frowned. "Making your pancake," Morgan answered. "No way, I'm not eating that. It might be carcinogenic by now," Rick said, eyeing a pot full of water. "What's this? Why is your bacon red?" The YouTube video said add water, 'cause it'll produce its own oil, Morgan insisted. Rick wasn't sure how to react. I'll just eat out. No way I'm touching that, Rick said. What's going on? Joy asked in surprise as she came back. Mum, why'd you let this one cause chaos in the kitchen? Rick complained. What chaos? I'm cooking. Just wait for it to produce its oil, Morgan defended. Dear, just a bit of water, not like soup, Joy corrected. Such a waste of food, Rick muttered, leaving. Morgan's face fell. Don't be sad. I'll teach you so you can impress him. Then maybe he'll devour you, Joy teased. Mum, that's so embarrassing, Morgan squeaked. Morgan began waking up early each day to practice cooking until she got the hang of it. One morning, she noticed Rick at the table, so she set down his favorite breakfast. At least you didn't meddle, Rick muttered. No, you're wrong. I made that for you, so you'll have some brain power at work. Morgan teased him with a grin. What's that supposed to mean? Rick asked. Nothing, Morgan answered quickly, then sat down. After they ate, Rick headed upstairs to shower. When he entered the bedroom, he saw Morgan fixing his clothes. Pretending not to notice, he walked into the bathroom. Their cold interactions continued, but Rick did see how caring Morgan was to him. Come in, Rick said upon hearing a knock on his office door. He paused his work, surprised to see his wife holding a paper bag. Morgan offered a sweet smile, which disappeared when Rick avoided eye contact. What are you doing here? Rick asked. I brought you lunch. You look like you skipped a meal, Morgan answered. We're in the office, Rick said sternly. Yeah, I know. Morgan sat across from him, making him hesitate in his paperwork. You've delivered lunch, so aren't you leaving? Rick asked. You haven't even said thank you. Thank you, now leave, Rick said with no emotion. Why are you sending me off so fast? You're just signing papers, Morgan persisted. I'm trying to read these documents and you're distracting me. Rick cut her off. What do you want exactly? Spill it so you can go. Morgan took a deep breath. My family's company is holding a charity event. I'd like you to come donate. All right, I will. Now please leave, Rick said. Morgan frowned at being interrupted repeatedly. Rick glanced up, seeing she was still there. I was hoping you'd come with me, so I'd have a date. Everyone knows you're my husband, Morgan explained. I'm busy, and I don't have time for that, Rick replied. Morgan expected that answer. She rose and left his office sadly. On the event day, Morgan had to stay 2 nights at a hotel because it was far away. She handled everything herself. At the venue, people kept asking about Rick. Morgan felt drained, so she sat by herself, watching everyone chat. Only a few more minutes remained before she could leave. Engineer Morgan, why are you all alone? A co-worker asked. Sorry I'm late. Morgan turned at the voice and saw Rick sitting beside her. She could hardly believe it. She didn't know how to react, especially as people began noticing Rick's arrival. What are you doing here? Morgan asked, amazed. I came for you, or my mum would have clobbered me, Rick answered. Morgan smiled to herself. People stared at them, so she couldn't wipe the grin off her face. Suddenly, the dance floor opened and everyone was dancing. You want to dance? Morgan asked, but Rick just gave her a serious look, making her mouth snap shut. Then the music switched to something upbeat, and Morgan grabbed Rick's hand. Let's dance! Rick didn't resist, as Morgan pulled him onto the dance floor. Morgan couldn't stop smiling, while Rick was stuck watching her. Shut up and dance with me, Morgan sang playfully. Rick smirked at Morgan's silliness. Before they knew it, both were enjoying the night. When they returned to the hotel, Morgan still had plenty of energy. They thought you wouldn't show. Some even joked I invented our marriage, Morgan told Rick. No need to prove anything, Rick said, removing his necktie, but then Morgan popped up in front of him to help take it off. Yeah, I ignore them anyway. I plan to go home, she said. After Morgan removed his tie, she started to leave, but Rick grabbed her arm. Why? Morgan asked, puzzled. Rick stared at the tie she held. I'm not stealing it. I'm just putting it away, Morgan teased, but Rick suddenly kissed her. Morgan froze for a second, then shut her eyes as she felt his lips against hers. It was like drowning in his kiss, but she didn't want to resurface. Neither realized they'd ended up on the bed, clothes discarded, letting passion take over. At sunrise, Morgan awoke to her phone ringing. She grabbed it, frowning at Mark's name. Mark? Morgan murmured, startled, but Rick snatched the phone and ended the call. Why's he calling you? Rick demanded seriously. Morgan shrugged. She truly had no idea. Rick got up to get dressed. Get yourself ready, we're heading back, he grumbled. Morgan couldn't figure out his mood. Even after arriving home, Rick ignored her and went straight upstairs. Morgan was about to follow him when Joy said, He might just be tired. Maybe, Mom, Morgan answered with a forced smile. Nothing changed. Rick still wouldn't talk to her. He left early, came home late. One morning he called to have Morgan deliver a signed contract for a big project. I'll swing by before I head to the site, Morgan offered on the phone. That document is urgent. Don't be late, Rick reminded. I'm literally just delivering it, no big deal, Morgan countered. Make sure, Rick said, ending the call. Morgan hurried her breakfast, got ready, and left. In the building's parking lot, she decided to grab coffees for Rick and herself. She placed the folder in her shoulder bag, then walked off with 2 hot drinks. All was calm until someone suddenly grabbed her bag. The force knocked Morgan down, and both scalding coffees spilled on her arm and leg. She saw her hand was burned, then looked at the speeding thief. Thief! Morgan shouted, scrambling to chase him despite her injuries. But the thief darted across a busy road, and Morgan couldn't follow without risking her life. Mom, are you okay? A couple of guards appeared. Go after him, Morgan yelled urgently. A few minutes later, the guards returned empty-handed. Morgan felt crushed. She went to Rick's office crying, her arm scraped, her leg and arm burned. She hadn't expected to see Mark there with Rick. Both men were stunned at her state. What happened? Mark asked worriedly. Morgan looked at Rick and cried harder, panicked about losing the contract. What happened? Rick demanded. Your document was stolen, Morgan sobbed. What? Rick exploded. Never mind that. Let's get you to a hospital, Mark interjected, grabbing Morgan's arm to help. But Rick caught Morgan's hand first. You lost that signed contract? Rick asked. I just wanted to buy coffee for us. Then suddenly, someone snatched my bag, Morgan explained, frazzled. Rick fixed his stare on her. That was a $200 million contract. And you lost it, he said calmly, though Morgan sensed his growing rage. 200 million? I'm sorry, Rick. Damn it, you're worthless. Morgan froze. She knew she'd messed up, but Rick's words cut right through her. I know it's my fault. If you want, I'll talk to their side. And say what? You got coffee, then lost their 200 million deal? Rick roared. Rick, calm down, Mark tried to pacify him. You haven't done anything useful, and now you cause problems, Rick shouted. Tears streamed down Morgan's face, as though Rick was stabbing her heart with his words. You talk like you don't need me at all, Morgan cried. I don't need you. I can leave you any time. I gave your family what they wanted, and you got what you wanted. Why are you still here? Each word hurt her deeply, so Morgan turned and ran. Morgan, Mark called, but she didn't stop. She jumped in her car and sped off. At Rick's house, she gathered her things. There was nothing happy left in this place. "Ma'am, where are you going?" a worried maid asked. "I'm going home," Morgan answered, tears still falling despite her efforts to stop. Her eyes had minds of their own. Morgan had to pull over at one point, bawling over Rick's cruel words. "I shouldn't even be crying," she told herself, resting her head on the steering wheel. She dozed off without noticing. She woke to her phone buzzing. Her eyes were swollen. Seeing Rick's name on the screen, she powered off the phone, glancing outside at the darkness. She started her car and finally arrived at her own family home. Her tears had dried by then, but seeing Grandma Benny, Morgan forced a sad smile. "Dear, why are you here?" her grandma asked, confused. Morgan tried to hold her tears, but lost. "What happened?" Grandma Benny asked, worried. Morgan ran into her grandma's arms and cried like a child. "Sorry, Grandma, I can't stay with Rick anymore," Morgan sobbed. "What happened?" the older woman pressed, but Morgan just cried, eventually retreating to her old bedroom to rest. Morgan kept her phone off, not wanting any noise. She stayed in her room for days. Eventually, she returned to a construction site, hoping work would distract her. She wasn't paying attention, wanting to be alone. "Engineer!" someone yelled, and Morgan glanced up to see a falling wooden beam. One worker yanked her out of the way, but Morgan lost her balance, everything going dark. Distant voices faded. Morgan slowly opened her eyes and shot upright, remembering the sight. She couldn't recall anything after the beam fell. "How are you feeling?" She turned, seeing Rick in a chair nearby. He moved toward her, but she leapt up. She had nothing to say. "You need rest," Rick insisted. Morgan tried to leave, but he grabbed her. "Did you know you were pregnant when you left?" Rick asked. Morgan froze, staring blankly. "Who's pregnant?" Morgan asked, confused. "The doctor says you're 3 weeks along," Rick told her. "Get back in bed and rest." "Thanks for caring, but I'll rest at my own home. I'd rather not see you," Morgan said, brushing his hand aside. "Morgan, don't risk our child's life because of your stubbornness." Morgan turned back, recalling something he had once said. "You said you never wanted a child with me, so you shouldn't care. We're not poor, so we don't need someone like you," Morgan declared before leaving the room. She stepped out of the hospital, but Rick followed. "I'll give you a ride," he offered. Morgan pretended not to hear, hailing a taxi. "He probably thinks I need him," Morgan muttered. Arriving at her family's house, Morgan locked herself in her room, lying on the bed, wrestling with her emotions. She'd learned she was pregnant by a man who didn't want her. "I'm sorry, baby. You might grow up without a complete family. Your dad wants nothing to do with me," Morgan cried. She had no plan, only tears. Eventually, exhaustion made her doze off. She awoke to knocking. It was Grandma Benny's voice. Morgan let her in, still half asleep, but she fully woke upon seeing Rick behind her grandma. "He's here to pick you up," Grandma Benny said. "I'm still sleepy, Grandma," Morgan claimed, trying to close the door on them. Rick blocked it and stepped inside. "I'll leave you two to talk," Grandma Benny said, leaving. "What are you doing here? I left your house so you'd have no more problems," Morgan stated. "You're carrying my child, my heir to my name. It may not be planned, but that's still my kid," Rick insisted. "I'm not abandoning this baby, so stop worrying. Now leave," Morgan snapped. "I will, if you come with me," Rick said, serious. "Oh? I thought you said you didn't need me, but now, because of the baby, I have to go with you?" Rick grabbed her hand, trying to pull her along. "Go home alone. I'm not going back or living with you," Morgan yelled. "You forget, you're still my wife. Where I am, you should be," Rick warned. Morgan smirked. "What if I don't want to? Stop pushing," Morgan snarled, snatching her hand away and slamming the door in his face. "Morgan!" Rick shouted, but she put on her earphones. Hours passed, and the house got quiet. Morgan finally emerged for dinner. She saw no sign of Rick. "He left last night," Grandma Benny explained, noticing Morgan's wandering gaze. "I'm not looking for him, Grandma," Morgan insisted. Grandma Benny grinned. "I see something between you two," she teased. "Well, you saw it wrong. There's no way we'll ever get along. I'm done wasting time on that jerk," Morgan ranted. She said goodbye and headed for work. Morgan inspected the site as usual, checking progress. When she stepped outside, she spotted two men without safety gear. "Do you have a death wish?" she snapped, only to see the man in shades was Rick. "Drop a cinder block on that jerk's head," Morgan barked to the laborers, furious at seeing Rick. Rick grabbed her hand and pulled her out of the site. "Let go!" Morgan yelled, but he didn't comply. One of Rick's men opened the car door. "I'm not getting in!" Morgan resisted, but Rick was too strong. He scooped her up bridal style and set her inside. Another man stood guard to keep her from escaping. "Excuse me, what are you doing with Engineer Morgan?" her supervisor asked. "Sir, he's kidnapping me. Help me," Morgan pleaded. "I'm Rick Delator, her husband," Rick said, showing an ID. No, sir, I don't know him. Please help," Morgan whimpered. "President Rick, yes, I remember you at the charity event," the supervisor said. Rick smiled in recognition. "My wife won't be coming back here. It's too dangerous for her. She's pregnant," Rick announced, handing over her resignation. "You can't do that," Morgan shrieked from inside the car. "I already did," Rick said, climbing in and driving off. "You're awful," Morgan fumed. Rick took her back to his house. "You can go out, visit your folks, shop, do whatever, but make sure you come home here, and let me know where you're going. You must have someone with you." Rick laid down the rules. "What on earth happened here? Thank goodness you're back, dear. We've been worried. You're pregnant with my grandchild," Joy said, relieved. Morgan only mumbled, "He cares about the baby, not me." She stayed with the Delatores. Sometimes she couldn't handle Rick's ways. Joy tended to Morgan lovingly. Over months, Rick softened a bit, until the baby was born. "Careful," Morgan whispered as Rick lifted their crying child. 1 month passed since Morgan gave birth. Rick had drastically changed. "You have work tomorrow. I'll handle it," Morgan offered. "Just rest an hour," Rick said. Morgan froze at his response, smiling secretly, returning to bed and watching him care for their baby. She no longer worked, focusing on the child. While grocery shopping, Morgan bumped into Mark. "Morgan," Mark greeted. "Haven't seen you in ages." Morgan smiled. "Yeah, how are you?" "I'm good. I never made it to your place. I've been busy in my hometown. Now I'm about to propose to my girlfriend," Mark revealed, and Morgan's eyes widened. "Congrats," she said. "We've been together 6 years, and I truly love her. I feel we're both ready, but I'm so nervous," Mark admitted. "Follow your heart," Morgan advised. "How did you feel about Rick? What made you decide you'd marry him?" Mark asked. Morgan paused, remembering the roller coaster of frustration, a little joy, a lot of hurt. "Crazy fights, annoyance, then a bit of happiness. Usually it hurts," Morgan answered. Mark looked confused. "That sounds rough. Weren't you scared?" Morgan felt like a 20-year veteran of marriage. "You'll know you're ready when you accept everything, good and bad," she said. "You're right, I get it now." Mark nodded. After groceries, Morgan swung by Rick's office to drop off lunch. Their baby stayed with Joy, so Morgan was free. She entered Rick's office with a bright smile, but Rick's face darkened upon seeing Mark with her. "I brought your lunch," Morgan said, holding it up. Rick glanced, then returned to his work. I already ate, he said curtly. What do I do with this? I'm not hungry either, Morgan muttered. Throw it out, Rick replied. Morgan's face fell at his rudeness. I'll eat it so her effort won't go to waste, Mark offered, irritated at his friend. Leave, Rick ordered them both. Mark took Morgan's hand. Let's go, he said, leading her out. He might just be busy, Morgan reasoned as they walked. He's infuriating. I was hoping for his help with something, but apparently he has zero clue how to be sweet, Mark grumbled. Haven't you gotten used to him yet? Morgan sighed. They parted ways outside. Morgan headed home to her baby. That evening, Rick returned late, slightly drunk but still coherent. As Morgan tried to approach, he moved away. Morgan felt sadder each time he ignored her. That pattern continued for days. Even at home, Rick worked non-stop. You should rest, Morgan said gently. He didn't reply, still ignoring her. She lost her patience and slammed his laptop shut. What the? Rick snapped. I was doing something important. Everything's always important to you, Morgan retorted. Are we important at all? What are you talking about? Rick asked in confusion. You barely notice me. I'm clueless about why you ignore me. I feel so stupid, Morgan whispered, eyes brimming. But why should I demand attention? You don't even… Morgan paused when Rick blurted, I'm jealous. She stared at him. Jealous? Of who? Rick looked away, never expecting to feel this. He'd married her for business, but Mark was always around. Morgan's brows shot up. She wasn't sure whether to laugh. Why would you be jealous of your friend? He's about to propose to his girlfriend, Morgan explained. So why does it feel like you're happier with him? Why not with me? Rick demanded, clearly confused. Morgan blinked. What do you mean? I can't explain it. But I know, even before you got pregnant or we had a kid, I started feeling something for you. I'm afraid that if you think you're happier with Mark, you'll choose him, Rick admitted. Morgan chuckled softly. I'm serious, Rick warned. I know, I just never imagined you'd actually like me, Morgan replied. I didn't either, Rick said. Morgan tried to respond, but Rick closed her mouth with a kiss. She didn't resist, shutting her eyes. You're my wife, so you're mine, Rick murmured. Before he could kiss her again, Morgan gently pushed him back. Actually, from the moment I saw you at the church that day, I liked you, Morgan admitted, blushing. I'm taking you back there, but this time, no business agenda, Rick promised, kissing her again. A few months later, they finally had a proper wedding. Morgan stood before the church doors, anxious. The first time, she had no clue who waited at the altar. Now she knew exactly who he was, someone who once caused her pain, but also gave her joy and a child. She wasn't backing out. After the ceremony, they were inseparable. Shall we make a sibling for Max? Rick whispered. Stop it, we still have guests, Morgan laughed. Let them be. Our kid's big enough to handle himself, Rick teased, grabbing Morgan's hand. The two slipped away, leaving Max with the grandparents. Morgan assumed they'd just go home, like the first time, when it was all awkward. Where are we headed? She asked. Rick only smiled. After about an hour's drive, they arrived at a huge house. I want a big family, Rick said. Is this your house? Morgan asked. She wasn't surprised Rick could buy a mansion, but she hadn't expected he already had one. It's our house, Rick clarified, leading her inside. It was nearly empty. I want you to design it however you like, Rick continued. Morgan's grin spread. She turned to face him. She'd never expected to come this far. I thought I'd only last 5 months with you to fulfill our family's wishes, but now I don't want to leave, because this is what I want, to be with the man I never thought I'd love, Morgan said. Rick brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. They say a family is strong if the man truly loves his wife. I'll do everything to love you more than you ever expect, he promised, hugging her. Though it happened suddenly, Morgan felt equally surprised by how deeply she now loved this man. Their wedding had started with no plan, but now they intended to build a loving family together. The end